Awesome. All right. So anyway, thank you everyone for coming to this presentation. We're going to show you a little bit about what it's like on the path to getting into medical school, what medical school training is like, and then some careers in medicine. So we are both first-year medical students at the University of Alberta, of course, in Edmonton. So my name is Kim.
And hello, my name is Mohammed.
Okay, so we have some slides to show you today, and I don't know, it starts off with a really quick game. And to be honest, it's kind of made for younger students, so you're probably like all gonna get them correct, but it's still fun. It makes you feel like we're getting in the spirit of everything. We're gonna diagnose some people. Okay, so hopefully you can see the presentation pretty well. I'm just gonna get it going. All right, so again, we're going to present about medical school today. So we have 6 cases to show you, and Mohammed and I are going to alternate through the cases, leading you through them. And then feel free to type in the chat what you think the correct diagnosis is. It's multiple choice, so don't be too worried about it. Okay, you are the doctor. Case 1. We have a 71-year-old male with yellow skin and yellow eyes, which is jaundice, dark urine and fatigue, and a history of alcoholism. So what is your best diagnosis from the list? Inflammatory bowel disease, chronic kidney disease, liver failure, or a urinary tract infection? Yeah, the answer is always COVID. Okay, very good. Yeah, okay, so most of you did get it. It is liver failure. So one big hint for physicians when they see someone with jaundice is that it probably means there's something wrong with the liver. The big reason for that, or the big hint for that, is because the liver works with a protein called bilirubin, and it is yellow colored. So if the liver is not functioning, you get a buildup of this bilirubin yellow protein, and then the skin and eyes start to appear kind of jaundiced and kind of yellowy. So the answer here is C.
Okay, so question 2. We have a 14-year-old female with skin that is paler than normal, and she gets dizzy when she stands up. She's fainted twice in the past week. She eats a vegetarian diet, and she had that since she was 6 months ago. So what is the best diagnosis from the list? Is it anemia, which is low blood cells, heart failure, tuberculosis infection, or type 1 diabetes? Right away, nice. So we got correct responses right away. So this one is in fact anemia. And one of the biggest hints that you can get from this question is the fact that her skin gets paler than when she stands up, and she gets dizzy when she stands up as well. And that has to do with a low amount of red blood cells. And so the other ones, for example, heart failure, it probably will have a more acute reaction than just getting dizzy. Tuberculosis infection is probably unlikely simply because of vaccination, and those aren't the symptoms that you get. And type 1 diabetes has to do with the amount of water that your body is able to reabsorb and the amount of water that you emit when you urinate, and that doesn't have to do with the symptoms here. Next.
Okay, now we have, this one's kind of easier, a 7-year-old person with clouded vision and bad night vision. They have a history of working outside in the sun without wearing sunglasses. So what do you think it is? Strabismus, lung disease, an E. coli infection, or cataracts? We also have an image to support. Oh, wait. Okay, great. Yeah, this is definitely cataracts, and you can see a pretty clear cataract in the patient's right eye here, which is on the left side for us. So cataracts, of course, as many of us know, is a really common thing to get as you get older. Lots of our grandparents get cataracts. It's just pretty normal. You get clouded lens, and then it's a really easy surgery. Actually, it's an ophthalmologist who will do that. So that's an eye surgeon. They go to medical school. They just remove the clouded lens and then replace it with an artificial clear one. It's pretty quick surgery.
Case number 4. So here we have an 8-year-old girl who has a new fever, a sore throat, pain when swallowing, and red spots on the roof of her mouth. What is the best diagnosis from the list? Is it allergies to her cat, viral conjunctivitis, which is another known as pink eye, pancreatic cancer, or pharyngitis, otherwise known as strep throat. Which one do you guys think it is? Yep. Nice, right away. So this one was a question where you can eliminate the other ones and get to the right answer. For example, pancreatic cancer, right away, you know that is definitely not it, because again, it doesn't have to do with any mass that is forming around the pancreas, as well as the symptoms. They're more around the throat area. So when you think of that, you should be thinking of pharyngitis, which is inflammation of the pharynx, and otherwise known as strep throat. Next.
Okay, now we have an x-ray to look at. 57-year-old male who suddenly lost a lot of weight. They sweat a lot at night, and they've been coughing for months. History of smoking cigarettes. The chest x-ray looks like this, and I have labeled it for you for your convenience. This is the heart, and this should not be here. So is it lung cancer, asthma, Alzheimer's disease, or congestive heart failure? Yay! Well, not yay for the P, but good job diagnosing. So yes, this is lung cancer, likely. So a couple big hints for physicians when they're interviewing patients: if they find out the patient has suddenly lost a lot of weight without trying, and if they sweat a lot at night, like they wake up and the bed sheets are just wet from all the sweating, that's a really big hint that the patient might have a really far progressed cancer. And then with all the other clues in this case having to do with the lungs and breathing and that obvious x-ray, it's probably going to be lung cancer, yeah. Here's our last case.
We have a 9-month-old baby with a runny nose, red and teary eyes, fever, strong cough that is followed by an intense deep breathing sound. History of not getting vaccines. So what's the best diagnosis? Is it a common cold, whooping cough, or pertussis, cystic fibrosis, or chickenpox? And Kim, do you have the sound for this? Or are you gonna play it?
But I don't know what's up with my recordings app, because I recorded this from YouTube with that YouTube video, and it's not like when I press play, nothing happens. So I'm sorry, you can't hear the sound of the cough.
It's all good. And the reason I asked Kim for this is because the sound that you hear from this is a very good indicator of what this condition is. And I see most of you, or all of you in the chat, had said B, which is correct. So again, common cold wouldn't present with these symptoms, as well as the fact that there's little shortness of breath that happens in common cold, usually not one of the symptoms, and you don't really have that characteristic breathing sound, which again, in your own time, if you type it in on YouTube, you can listen to it. And then again, it's not relevant to chickenpox or cystic fibrosis, so the answer is B. Good.
Cool. Congratulations, you are all well on your way to becoming physicians. So we're going to get going on the presentation now. And Mohammed, sorry to dump this on you, but I just made this today just because these next two slides of examples of physicians or medical doctors, and then examples of other healthcare professionals. Just because we often find people asking questions being like, oh, I'm interested in this career, and they don't actually know if they need to go to medical school or not. So if you're interested in this long list, you have to go to medical school. So these include your family physicians, pretty much all types of surgeons, and then, geriatricians with the elderly, pediatricians with the kids, all kinds of internal medicine, like cardio, nephrology, which is kidneys, pulmonology, which is lungs, stuff like that, anesthesiologists. These are all physicians, MDs, they go to medical school if you're interested in these kinds of careers. On the flip side, if Mohammed wants to present this.
Yeah. Actually, thank you for making this, Kim, because I think it's really valuable for everyone to understand the differences. So on this slide here, we have, so these are other healthcare professionals. So they also work in healthcare and medicine, but they aren't medical doctors, so they're not physicians. So dentists, they go to dentistry school. Dental hygienists, they would do a dental hygienist program. Nurses would go do a bachelor's degree in nursing. A nurse practitioner would follow that up with a master's in nursing. Pharmacists would go to pharmacy school, et cetera, et cetera. And so there are many wonderful careers in healthcare, and not all of them require you to go to medical school.
Okay, and now to begin our regularly scheduled programming that Mohammed is used to. So So this is the University of Alberta Hospital, and it's kind of our main base for where we do a lot of our learning in these kinds of healthcare buildings here on the U of A campus. It's right beside the undergrad campus. And we don't just have the MD program in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry here. We also have other programs like radiation therapy, medical lab science, dentistry, and dental hygiene. But of course, our presentation today is going to focus on the MD program, which is the program to become a physician or a medical doctor.
Okay, so the MD program at the U of A has 660 undergraduate medical students. So our class has about 164 students. So if you times that by 4, you should get approximately all the number in all 4 years of the program. We also have a really big faculty of more than 700 full-time faculty members, 2,200 community clinical faculty. So these would be doctors who work in the community who would take up medical students in, for example, in clerkship or in residency, but they're not professors in the medical school. And then,
oh, can you see that?
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I was just trying to open my speaker notes.
Oh, yeah. Are you good now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Awesome. All right, so yeah, so today we're just gonna hit the highlights of the admissions process for applying to medical school, and then we're gonna jump into some information about what medical school is really like for students in the program. Of course, you can find all the information for applying to medical school on our website. The main point that we want to give off today is that medicine is for everyone. We accept people in our program from all different academic backgrounds and walks of life, and we encourage you to apply from wherever you come from if you're interested in medicine. So the main point that we really want to emphasize as well is that you do not have to have a science degree to apply to medical school. You can do any kind of 4-year undergraduate, bachelor's degree, and then you can still apply to medical school. So whatever you're passionate about, that's completely fine. If you're into, arts, education, engineering, nursing, native studies, whatever you're into, you can do that degree before applying to med school.
You know the percentage who make it through? Oh, that's a great question. I don't know, Kim. Do you know how to answer that question?
I don't actually know. I don't think that. Well, okay, yeah, the med program probably does collect that information, but it's not available on their website. Things that are available on our website for statistics are like GPA averages, Mcat averages, gender proportions, and like Albertan and non-Albertan stats, but we don't have like what degree backgrounds people come from.
So could I ask a follow-up question there, Kim and Mohammed? So you say that students from any background can apply. In order to sit the Mcat, just from your own perspective as having done that recently, would you say that students who don't have a science background would be able to sit the Mcat without taking some kind of intensive science preparation course?
So that's a really great question. So the Mcat, most of the Mcat is first and second year science courses. It doesn't really have a lot of upper year, third and fourth year science courses. And so if you are someone taking a non-science degree, what you could do, if possible, is to take electives in science courses while you do, let's say, an arts degree. And so you would be able to take those courses to help prepare you. And if that's not possible, then I feel that you would probably have to do a lot more studying. But Kim and I, we both did science degrees, so I can't really speak on how that. Kim, do you have any input on that?
No, not really. Just the general idea that there are totally a lot of people in our class who come from non-science backgrounds, so clearly they succeeded on the Mcat. It just means that maybe they had to do more studying, which could have been more book studying and using online resources, or if they could afford the time and money, then they might have taken a prep course.
Okay, thank you for that, because that's really important clarification.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel said a very nice comment here. He said he took the Mcat in the summer. There was a lot of material that wasn't covered, so he had to study more, and he still did great. So yeah, just to reiterate the point of, you can definitely still do well. You just have to put in a bit more work and be self-motivated. But you don't need to necessarily do a science degree just for the Mcat, for sure. Now, so yeah, bachelor's degree is a requirement. So you need to have finished a 4-year degree before starting the program. And as Kim said, any specialty. So just to add to that point, we have classmates who did music degrees, drama degrees, engineering degrees, education degrees, et cetera, et cetera. And then in terms of, these are the minimum requirements. So one thing you will notice is the fact that there's a difference between an Alberta resident and an out-of-province applicant. So I'm sure most, if not all of you in this presentation would be considered an Alberta resident because you probably live in Alberta if you go to King's University. And so it's a bit different because every medical school has, and every province kind of has their own preference for the residents. Kind of the theory that the government does subsidize a lot of our medical education, and they think that, you know, if you have medical students who come from the province, and they're more likely to work as a physician in that province, and so it kind of helps the people from that province. So it's a little bit less if you're from Alberta than out of province, but this is just a minimum. The competitive averages are listed on the website, and they're significantly higher than this, but this is the minimum to apply. And then for the MCAT, so the MCAT the scaling is really weird. Every section is out of 132, I believe. The minimum is 118. And so you need to have a minimum 124 out of 132 in each section if you're from Alberta. And then if you're from outside of Alberta, the cutoff is 128 out of 132 on the CARS section, which is the reading comprehension section. And non-academic requirements. So this is also very important. So besides having, you know, good grades and a good MCAT score, it's also important to have really good personal activities, which means things like work experience, volunteer experience, extracurriculars, leadership, life experiences, things that have, you know, contributed to how, you know, you've developed in life and matured. References are important. So having 2 people who can attest to your character and you know, your involvement in a particular activity or class or research or whatever. And the Casper, so this is an online situational test where you're kind of given 5 minutes for either a video prompt or a paragraph that kind of says something like, you know, there's 2 friends in this situation. They got into an argument over this topic. You know, they're trying to rectify and, you know, make up. So how would you, as a third person, you know, help the situation? So you would just type right away, you know, your input on how to solve this problem, and perhaps maybe including your own personal experiences in your life where you had to problem solve. And then finally, assuming that, you know, you have great marks, MCAT, personal activities, references, and Casper score, and you make it to the short list of the top applicants who have, you know, the minimum to get to the interview stage. And then the interview is very important. So the interview would be when you would, you know, try your best to showcase, you know, yourself and answer the questions. And assuming you have a good score on everything, including the interview, then you would get admission.
Okay, so this is just kind of a flow chart summarizing everything we've said. So first you're going to do an undergrad degree. Again, it can be any kind of degree, does not have to be a science degree. And during your undergrad degree, you'll do some extracurriculars. So that's anything that's not your classes. That could be employment, volunteering, research, leadership, stuff like that. Sometime during your undergrad degree, you're going to take the Mcat exam. So again, like Mohammed said, it's a pretty long exam. It's like 7.5 hours. It has 4 sections: biochem, chemistry, physics, psychology, sociology, and reading comprehension. There is no calculus or math section, but you don't get a calculator. You do have to do like physics and chemistry math in your head. Anyway, so you write the MCAT and you apply to medical school at some point. And sometime during your application time as well, you write that Casper test, which is an online assessment. It has nothing to do with the MCAT whatsoever. People don't usually study for it. It's just, again, like Mohammed explained, a situational kind of thing where it'll, again, ask you like scenarios, and it's more like a personality assessment. Like, what would you do in this situation? And if they like your pre-interview package, then they might invite you for an interview. And then usually it's an in-person interview that's kind of like a half-day event. But for me and Mohammed, it was online this year. And if they like how you performed an interview, then you will get accepted into medical school. So this whole process, as you can tell, it's long, and it does take about a year long. So if you don't get into med school on your first try, which is totally okay and very common, you just kind of have to wait a year to try again.
Or 3 years in my case, which I'll get to in a bit. So there's a very good question here from Ian. It says, is the completed bachelor's degree a firm requirement, or have mature students with technical training applied after 2 years for Bachelor of Science? So about 4 or 5 years ago, the University of Alberta had that, like, if you applied to the U of A, you could get in before finishing a degree with 2 or even just 3 years of undergrad. They changed that rule about 3 years ago. Completed degree before starting. In fact, when we got our admission offer in May, Kim and I, the email said you need proof of finishing your degree to accept your final offer. So if you don't have the physical degree in hand before starting, you will get your offer revoked. So unfortunately, that's the new rule now, but it wasn't like that in the past. A few years ago, you could get in with a few years of undergrad, but they changed it. Now, this slide here is just talking about the applicants for the MD program at the U of A. So again, about the in-province versus out-of-province. So 85% of our class is from Alberta, and the remaining 15% is from citizens outside of Canada, in Canada, but from other provinces. And then there are 10 positions for rural applicants. So if you, I don't know the exact criteria, but I believe if you've lived in what they consider a geographic rural location for a certain number of time, you can be considered for this rural position quota, but you can look up the specifics on the website. And then also if you are considered an Indigenous applicant, so there's a separate process for Indigenous applicants because I'm sure we all know, the barriers that Indigenous Canadians have faced in Canada and their underrepresentation in medicine. This is one of the ways the University of Alberta is taking a really great progressive approach to increase representation of Indigenous applicants in medicine.
Yeah, and new this year, I believe we also have a Black applicant stream for medical school as well. So that's something to look up on our website as well.
And sorry, you can
Mohammed.
Oh, I was just going to answer Caleb's question. I have a 3-year BA and I'm doing a 2-year after education. If I finish both, would I be applied given? I would assume, yeah, definitely. Kim, can you answer? I think
so. I mean, if you completed a bachelor's degree and then you're doing another degree, that's like 2 degrees. That's definitely more than enough, right?
Yeah. Just the only thing that tripped me up was the bachelor's degree was 3 years, the first one, but I think it should be okay because you would have 5 years of total education.
So anyway, as you can tell, we aren't always 100% on all of these kinds of special cases. So if you're ever at all concerned about everything, please reach out to the admissions team at U of A. Like, you just go on the U of A admissions website for med school and then email their office, and it's their job to answer questions like this. So you can totally ask them. It's their job to answer. Okay. Okay, research and medical school. So I'm sure many of you have kind of heard about the idea of research before, especially these days in the news. Of course, you can do research in your undergrad if you're interested. So commonly people do this in the summers between undergrad summers, because it is often a 4-month summer, depending on where you go and what program you do. But you can also do research in medical school as well if you're interested. And a common time to do that is during our 4-month summers as well, although the summers do get kind of shorter and shorter as you go through med school. But anyway, summer is a classic time to do research as well in medical school. You could casually be in a lab as well during med school, but you're usually a little too busy to do it during the school year. There are also some kind of higher level research opportunities available in med school. And the biggest one that probably only 1, maybe 2 people per med school class does every year is an MD PhD. So yes, you get your MD to be a physician and you get your PhD in clinical sciences. You have to add years onto your MD to be able to get an MD PhD, but that's for people who are intensely very interested in both being a physician and being very competent in research. So again, that's a rare thing to do as an MD PhD, but a lot of people kind of dabble in summer research while they're in medical school. One thing I want to make clear here is that do not feel pressured to do research just to get into med school if you hate it. Don't do it. Please just do extracurriculars that you enjoy in order to get into med school. Don't do it just to check off a box on your list. It's not going to be worth it.
So this is a really nice photo here. This is a white coat ceremony. So some of you may know, but this is the one of the rites of passage of medicine in North America, in both Canada and the US. So the U of A, there's a really nice ceremony where you go up on stage, they call you one by one, and then your friends and family are in the audience. Hopefully you take a bunch of nice photos, you get to shake hands with some faculty and the dean of the medical school, and it's a really nice entrance into medicine. Now, normally this ceremony happens in the end of September, so a couple of months after beginning medical school. Unfortunately for Kim and I this year, because of COVID, it kind of got canceled. However, it's going to be postponed. They haven't told us when it's going to happen, but the faculty kind of asked our class. They said, you know, would you guys rather have one online? And everyone said, no, 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 please wait until the situation gets better because we want to remember this moment in person.
No. Okay, so what does the medical school program look like now? So we're getting like, okay, you got into med school, now what happens for the next 4 years? So in general, no matter what med school you go to in Canada, they tend to divide it into half and half. So the first half is generally called pre-clerkship or pre-clinical, and that's when you're really learning, like doing the learning about what the body systems do when they're working and about what happens when they're not working. So we learn about, you know, being healthy in different diseases as well. So we learn that through like your classic lectures, but we also get kind of hands-on with like anatomy labs with cadavers. We also do like clinical skills classes. So like we'll practice taking histories on each other, like patient history. We'll also practice doing physical exams on each other and practice using different tools that we have in our simulation labs. And we also, during our first and second year, do some shadowing of physicians in their clinics. So we go through all the different body systems that you can see on the left here. We don't like have like 6 or 7 classes at a time in med school. We work in blocks. So we do everything we do every day is about this one organ system, and then we take an exam, and then we move on to the next organ system. That's what the structure of med school looks like for us. So me and Mohammed currently are on endocrine systems. So we're learning about all the hormones of the body. This week has been all about like lipids and bone metabolism, basically, for us. So that's what the first 2 years of med school look like.
This is just a picture here illustrating an example of a clinical in-person session where you have some medical students practicing, I guess, taking vital signs on a dummy here.
His name is Harvey, and we're not allowed to touch him unsupervised.
Right.
Very
and the
expensive. He simulates different diseses.
There you go. And the reason I probably forgot that name was because we haven't actually met him yet, because the first semester was online. So.
So this is just showing one kind of special opportunity that we have at U of A Medical School in particular. And this is part of our physicianship course where we kind of learn more of the, I don't know, practical and emotional and philosophical aspects of being a doctor and not just learning about different diseases. So one special thing that we do at U of A is this patient immersion experience. So all the first and second year medical students will get paired up with a patient who has a chronic disease. So they've been living with that disease for years. And you meet with them a couple times over the year and you get to chat with them about what their experience has been like living with that disease and their experience in the healthcare system. And it's really impactful for the students. And then at the end of the year, the med students make up these kind of like art projects to sort of represent what they learned from the experience. And like everyone and the patients and their families all come and people think it's a really beautiful experience.
So this is the MD program years 3 and 4. So the first 2 years that Kim described are called the preclinical years. Preclinical because you're not generally spending most of your time in the hospital. However, years 3 and 4 are called the clinical years because generally you're spending all of your time in the hospital and the clinic. And so you rotate. So in the preclinical years, Kim described that we focus on a block at a time. So in years 3 and 4, it's similar, except instead of focusing on a body system, we focus on a particular area of medicine for a few months. So for example, there's internal medicine, obstetrics and gynecology, pediatrics, psychiatry, family medicine, surgery, etc. So years 3 and the beginning of year 4 is generally when everyone would rotate through all of these different blocks. And then the rest of year 4 is when you would do your electives. So your electives would be, let's say you wanted to go into plastic surgery. You would generally spend a lot of your electives going to different universities in Canada that have plastic surgery programs, where you go and you try to, put on a good impression, try your best, work hard, and hopefully maybe get reference letters from those programs to apply at the end of year 4.
And this is just a picture kind of reiterating that idea that in your second half of medical school in clerkship, like you really get involved with being on the floor in the wards with patients, and you're really learning from the physicians, learning how to use those physical techniques. You're interviewing the patients themselves, doing the physical exams yourself, and trying out different specialties to see which one you might be interested in for doing residency after med school.
So this is a great slide about student supports. So the reason this is one of my favorite slides is personally for me, when I went through high school and undergrad, it was a grind in terms of, just you're trying to focus on getting really high marks and, volunteering, etc. And, at least for me, I didn't really feel like I was supported too much by my professors because, I was there to get a science degree, and, whether I graduated, got a degree, or whether I dropped out, whatever, it didn't really matter to anyone. But medical school is completely different. So once you enter medical school, you have a very, very awesome support system. So everything, for example, in terms of your mental health, in terms of, how things are going in your family life, you are paired up with a faculty mentor who's always checking up on you. You have their cell phone number, you have their email. In terms of academics, you're also paired up with a faculty member who checks up on you every few weeks in terms of how you're doing in your courses. And then in terms of, we have our wellness office, which gives us lectures every couple of weeks, giving us nice motivational talks. There's probably so many resources I don't even know of. It's absolutely amazing, the support you get, because in Canada, once you get into medical school, you're in, and you're going to be a doctor, and so they do everything they can to support you along the way. And one thing that is also really cool is that in Canada and U of A, obviously because we're in Canada, medical schools pass-fail, which means there's no GPA anymore, there's no marks to worry about, there's no pressure. And so you're just there to learn medicine. You're there to become a good doctor and to improve your skills. So the pressure is off in that way. So it's really great.
And after 4 years of medical school, students graduate with a Doctor of Medicine, their MD, and they're really proud of themselves for completing all of that hard work, pre-clerkship and then clerkship. You're not done though yet. So once you finish your 4 years, yes, you are a physician, you are a medical doctor, but you have to do residency.
Ms. Sandel just said a very great point. So that's exactly why. I think I read it's a figure, something crazy, like from beginning of medical school to end of residencies, upwards of $1 million the government invests in each one of us to become a doctor. So we obviously don't pay $1 million in tuition. We pay much, much less than that. But in the end, the government and the healthcare is subsidizing our training a lot. And so that's exactly why they don't want you to drop out or leave or fail. So in terms of residency training, so there are 55 residency training programs at the U of A, which is really great. And the U of A actually has every residency training program. So being a really big medical school, whatever residency program you want to enter, you can, shadow, work with the faculty, do research, and hopefully match into that if that's what you want to do. It's not the same at every medical school. Smaller medical schools in Canada don't have some of the smaller programs like dermatology, ophthalmology, plastic surgery, etc. Now, in terms of the choice of specialty, so after medical school, when you finish, you kind of can dictate how long you want your further training to be. And there's a big range. So the shortest amount of training time is 2 years, which will be family medicine. And the longest I feel is, I think, 6 or 7 years, and that's neurosurgery or cardiac surgery. So if you really want to do a lot more years of school, it's available for you. And there are many other specialties that are generally about 5 years. So example, pediatrics, general surgery, psychiatry, etc.
Okay, and just like that, the journey to becoming a practicing physician is done. Many years of hard work have paid off, and these doctors are now ready to start their careers. So we hope you've enjoyed our presentation. We're happy to take questions from you now, and thank you again for being such great audience members and being interested in this topic.
And just want to quickly answer a question here. Can you apply for residency anywhere in Canada? Great question. So how the residency training program works in Canada, you apply through a system called CARMS, which stands for the Canadian Residency Matched Service. And what ends up happening is in your 4th year medical school, yeah, exactly. That's the acronym. So you can look into that later. And what you would do in your 4th year medical school, you hopefully by then you kind of narrowed it down to 1, maybe 2, like a backup specialty. So that means like, if you don't get your first choice, you'd be equally happy to do a second field. And you would apply to any medical school in Canada that you feel you'd want to be there, right? So if you have no choice or preference, like you don't, like for example, you just want to be a pediatrician, but you don't care where you go, then you would apply to like any university that you can in Canada. And so, but for example, if you're more limited, let's say you only want to live in Calgary or Edmonton or Vancouver, then you would probably, maybe only apply to those or rank those really high. And what ends up happening is at the end, you would rank all your programs. So let's say, for example, you've interviewed at, many medical schools in Canada and you want to be a pediatrician, but you really want to live in Edmonton. So you would rank Edmonton number 1, and then you would, let's say, rank Calgary number 2, and then let's say you would rank Vancouver number 3. So then you would apply and you would say, this is my rank list. So I want to be in Edmonton, then Calgary, then Vancouver, and I want to be a pediatrician. At the same time, those 3 programs, so Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver, will have their list of applicants who applied to them. And they will rank the applicants based on who they want the most. So then the university will say, okay, we have, let's say, 10 spots, and this is our top 10. But then they will also rank above the top 10. So for example, if the university really wants Mike in Vancouver, but Mike doesn't want to be in Vancouver, they'll move on to the next person. And so it's a really complicated system. But in the end, the computer does an algorithm where they try to match the university's top choice and your top choice. So they want to kind of benefit you and the university. If you want to learn more about this, you can, YouTube videos are a really nice description of how it works. But in the end, you can apply to any university in Canada, and then you rank where you want to go. They rank you. The computer puts up random calculation, and they'll put where it benefits you and the university. That's my answer.
Yeah, so that's matching at the end of med school, but you definitely don't have to worry about that. First we worry about getting into med school, then we worry about residency.
Yeah.
We just like enhance our worries every 4 years. Okay, so I see a question about age, and then I did put in the link to the statistics showing stats for people who successfully get into med school. So you will see that the trend is increasing age for people who get into med school. And I think that that just goes to show that med schools are trying to be a lot more diverse and holistic now. So they're a lot more willing to and looking to accept people from different backgrounds. So that might be someone who's already had a career before this. We have someone in our class who has like 3 kids, and he was a pastor for 10 years. Like, but that is the far and few between cases. Most people just came from undergrad or maybe did a master's degree, but just to let you know, yes, it is totally possible that we do have mature students in our class. We actually have like quite a number of parents in our class. They have their own Facebook page and stuff.
So I've been noticing that that's kind of been a little bit of a theme, that you're broadening who you're allowing into the medical programs. And, I've heard a little bit about narrative medicine and that kind of stuff. So what kind of focus would there be? Like you even touched on the philosophical side of medicine and all that stuff. Like, is there a focus on that kind of learning in the medical program, or?
So,
sorry, go ahead, Mohammed.
Do you have an answer, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I have a bit of an answer. It's hard for us since we're not like the curriculum developers, but and because we just started like 3 months ago. But anyway, the general idea I get is that, yeah, most of your classroom learning is definitely scientific based, like you're learning the disease process. There's just so much of that to learn, right? So that's the majority of what we learn, and that's what we're getting tested on. However, there are so many extracurricular and elective opportunities for this kind of more philosophical based, like really holistic based view of medicine. Like you can do these like streams of electives. You have to do a certain number of elective hours each year in your first and second year. And some people choose to do them like in wilderness medicine, but others choose to do the arts and humanities medicine electives. And they say that's like a really awesome experience and they love that. So there are actually lots of opportunities to learn about that side of medicine on here. And we do have like mandatory small group discussion groups where we talk about our feelings and stuff too. So that's like involved, but definitely the core curriculum is definitely medical based and scientific based.
Great answer. I just want to add to that. So as I'm sure all of you know, well, at least I can speak on my behalf. When I applied to medical school when I was 21 the first time, and I grew up a lot since then, and I got in when I was 25. And so over the years, I matured and I developed a lot of life experience. And you will generally find, probably the older you get, the more life experience that you build will help you become a better doctor, because you're more mature. You can, you've experienced life, and you can share those experiences with patients. And so the medical schools do value life experience, and they do value, you going through, you maybe doing multiple degrees, maybe, living, let's say working a career or having a second career in medicine, as opposed to, just get, and that's probably one of the reasons why now you need a degree to get in. Before, again, you could get in after 2 years of undergrad. So technically 4 years ago, you could start medical school at 19, but they got rid of that for a few reasons. That could be one of them. So now you need a degree minimum. And to answer, is the length of time for residency the same across Canadian universities? Good question. So the answer would be yes. So in Canada, residency programs are all regulated under the same board. And so when you finish a residency program, let's say in Ontario, and you finish residency, you can work anywhere in Canada. Your license in Ontario will translate to Alberta. And for that to be possible, there's the same requirements that you need to do. Let's say, again, you wanted to, let's say, pediatrics. If you do pediatrics at University of Toronto, or you do pediatrics at University of British Columbia, and in the end, you want to work in Calgary, but you did your training, you didn't even do it in Calgary, you did it in BC or Ontario, it doesn't matter because it's the same length and same requirements.
Okay, I got a direct message asking, when you're applying to medicine, do they look at your third and fourth year marks? It really depends on what medical school you're applying to, how they calculate your GPA. For U of A, as far as I'm aware, you have to have a full bachelor's degree by the time you get in. But a lot of us are applying during our fourth year of university, so we don't have those marks available to give them yet, right? So for me, they weren't calculating with my fourth year marks because I got in right after undergrad. But they also drop your worst year of marks. So they also dropped my first year, which meant they were just using my second and third year when they were calculating my GPA to get in. However, things were probably different for people who maybe took a gap year after, or were doing grad school and who, did have their fourth year marks to contribute. In that case, they would have just dropped 1 year, but they would have been using 3 to calculate because they had another one available. So yeah, it really differs by med school, and you really got to go searching on their websites to see the rules for how they calculate GPA, because it differs at every med school. And if you have questions, definitely reach out to them by email.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. So the first time I applied, I also was in my fourth year. And so they couldn't include my fourth year marks because that's the year you apply. And again, just like Kim, they dropped my first year. But I applied again and I had finished fourth year. And so then they would include them. So if you're applying with already finished 4+ years of university, then they would look at it. But if you're applying in your fourth year of university and you have no prior post-secondary, then they wouldn't consider it because they don't consider marks in the year that you apply. Can you please share more about the interview process, happens type of questions? So for this, there's a confidentiality agreement we had to sign, so we can't necessarily tell you what the actual questions were, but what we can share with you is that, well, I can share how I prepared. So I prepared a lot, and the reason I prepared a lot, and I'll get to this when Kim and I share about our own personal journeys, is I applied to medical school the first time. I was in my fourth year of undergrad, and I got an interview to medical school. However, I did something that I don't recommend anyone to ever do. I did not prepare much. I didn't go in prepared, and I didn't do well. And I knew I was going to get rejected after the interview. And so the next time that I got an interview, I prepared a lot. So I spent a few months. I reflected about my own personal experiences. I read a bunch of different topics in healthcare. I did a bunch of practice questions with family and friends. I, asked people's opinion on how I should approach a different question. I even videotaped myself. I did absolutely everything I could to prepare because I knew I was not going to make the same mistake twice. And then I got it. So a tip that I can give you is to prepare a lot for it. prepare with a lot of different people, take it seriously, and try your best, and hopefully you do well.
Yeah, from my perspective, I definitely was, thankfully, I thought of it the first time around. I was like, I'm not leaving anything to chance. Like, I prepared for literally like 3-4 months hardcore for the interview. That was even before they told you whether you got an interview, because they only tell you about a month before the interview happens. That's not enough to get very good. So even before I was told whether I got interviews, I started prepping with other people I knew, my friends who also applied to med schools. Like, we pretty much formed like a task force. We would book like the study rooms at the library between our classes. And we had formed together this like document. We had just gone through pages and pages and pages of Google looking for interview practice questions that just happened to be made by people and available online. And we made it into a huge collective document. And then we would bring it with us to our practice sessions, and we would just take turns, one person being the interviewee, one being the interviewer, and then the other people observing and taking recommendations and notes down. Obviously, none of us were from the admissions process. Most of us hadn't been interviewed before, so we were just making our best guess on how to improve things. But a lot of it is just stuff that you can, even if you don't know if your content is correct, the way you present it can get so much better with practice. So you learn how to make proper eye contact. You learn how to do some hand gestures to keep them engaged. You learn to smile and look really happy about what you're doing. And then you also learn how to do the thinking part, because there are 2 different types of interviews, and U of A uses both of them. One is a traditional panel interview. It's you, 2 or 3 people. They're just asking you questions. You're answering them like a regular interview. The second kind of interview, which U of A also uses, is the MMI, or multiple mini interview. It's a hallway of doors. Each door has a question. You have 2 minutes to read the question. You go in 5 to 8 minutes to defend yourself. Next room, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And there's about 8 to 12 in the circuit. It's pretty hardcore. So just getting comfortable with the feeling of that, like repeatedly doing stations, is something that you get a lot better with practice. So again, I wouldn't leave that to chance. Just get better at that and more comfortable with thinking in 2 minutes, answering, and then clearing your mind before doing the next room. It takes practice.
I 100% agree with Kim, and it's definitely a skill that you can work on. Like, when I first started practicing and when I first had my interview, I was not very good at it. But with time, I developed those skills. I developed the confidence, and so even if you're not starting out at a very high level, you can definitely get admitted if you do enough practice. The emphasis does vary from schools to school. I guess, was that about?
That might have been for a separate thing.
Maybe about age stats. Yeah, and actually you're right about that. So, and this is something that I looked into, because one of my really good friends actually goes to University of Ottawa Medical School. He's from Calgary, and he didn't get into the U of A or U of C, but he got into Ottawa, which is actually a pretty rare case, because usually people get into their in-province school, not the out-of-province school. But I guess he told me he really resonated well at his Ottawa interview and felt good, and so he got into Ottawa, and now he's there. And at his school, you can actually apply without finishing the university degree. So there's quite a few of his classmates who got in after third year of undergrad, which means they started medical school at 21. And the University of Ottawa is different in that they really care about GPA. Like, their average GPA is almost 4.0. It's very, very high. But the University of Ottawa doesn't require the MCAT. And the reason it doesn't require the MCAT is because it's in Ottawa, and there's a French stream and English stream. And so they want to make sure there's no French MCAT. There's only an English MCAT. And so they want to make it equitable for Francophones in Canada to have a chance at their medical school. It's one of the only schools in Canada that does not require the MCAT. But again, take note, the GPA requirement is almost a perfect 4.0. And they don't do drops, drop your worst year. So you basically need perfect marks in every year of your undergrad. Or on near perfect marks. So again, to answer that question, different medical schools have different requirements, and they, you can generally find one that is suitable for your application profile.
Yeah, that's definitely the moral of the story, is that please repeatedly check the eligibility requirements for all the med schools you might want to consider applying to, because they all require different things. It's frustrating. And yeah, it takes like months to apply to each one, because like it takes forever to fill out all their different forms for all the different schools. We were asked, how many students does the U of A admit? It's about 162-ish per class. for medical school. It's a
Out of like
pretty
18
medium-sized med school.
sorry, I was gonna say out of like 1,800 applicants, so like
Yeah.
9%. So yeah. On average, on a Saturday undergrad session, I'm especially trained back in case I'm happy and well. Oh, that's an amazing resource that you had. In fact, when I was in undergrad, I was looking for like someone that has experience like that at the University of Calgary, and I couldn't find anyone because, well, I could find someone who could help with like job applications, but there wasn't a dedicated person who had experience with anything to do with healthcare or medicine. So that's a great resource, and I think you should take advantage of that.
Another thing you should consider, just because you guys are in Edmonton, so you can physically access U of A in normal times, is that if you look at the U of A's website in the Career Center, about once a year, they do a mock MMI day where you go through the stations. It's not hosted by the med school, so you can't confirm that the advice you're getting is fantastic because it's not by people on the medical admissions committee. It's by the Career Center people, but like at least it's a good way to get used and try out a day of like getting dressed, going to the place. I think it costs like $75 or something, but it's the U of A Career Center and they do a mock MMI day and you can join even if you're not from U of A. We had a couple people from Calgary drive up just for it.
And actually, that's a really funny comment, and it's unfortunately stereotypically true for my friend. So he was a very, very smart, studious guy, and again, he honestly had 4.0 in like every course in all of undergrad and a master's. So he did 6 years of school, bachelor's and master's, perfect grade in every course he ever took. And he was someone who, he was very introverted, and he never went out a lot, and it made sense because his marks were perfect and he got into medical school. So again, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't need, like, you can't have a life to get into medical school, or everyone in Ottawa is like that. But I always, make fun of him for that stereotype in a friendly, joking way, of course.
Are there any other questions? We're happy to answer any.
Did you want to share your experiences, Kim, and mine really quick about your journey?
Yeah, sure. So I did my undergrad at U of A. I did it in sciences, in immunology and infection. I specialized. And I don't know, I liked the topic. It was a good degree. It was kind of health sciencey focused as well, which is something I obviously am interested in. And I applied to med school in my 4th year of undergrad, and I was lucky enough that I did get accepted into medical schools. And yeah, and I started U of A right after. I would say that again, as we've said, we encourage you to do things that you enjoy as your extracurriculars. Like, don't feel pressured to pick this one thing you think looks fanciest on an application. Like, do what you actually like to do. They can tell if you're faking it or not. So for me, and actually me and Mohammed both share, that's why we're here. We love teaching, we love mentoring. So most of my extracurriculars focused on teaching. I was a tutor as my job. I was a teaching assistant in genetics at the university. I was a youth leader for a nonprofit youth group in Edmonton. I loved all of those things, and those were kind of my main extracurriculars when I was applying.
And for me, there was someone who was talking about an education degree, but I think unfortunately he left. I wish he was still on because that's what I did. So I did a science degree, and again, I applied in my 4th year of undergrad. I didn't get in, and unfortunately, then I realized, I was limited in my job prospects with just a Bachelor of Science degree. And I knew I didn't want to really work in research or work in a lab. And so I thought, what do I like to do? Well, I've been a basketball coach, a soccer coach. I've been a tutor. I've worked at youth camps. I've volunteered with kids, all of those things. And so I told myself, obviously my first goal is to become a doctor and get into medical school. But if I would never get accepted to medical school, what's the next best thing? And for me, that was to be a high school science teacher. And so I went back and I did the 2-year after degree in education. And then as soon as I finished it, I got accepted to medical school. So I never got to actually work as a teacher, but I have that additional degree under my belt in that way. And so I can speak from the perspective of someone who didn't get in on their first try. Perhaps consider, an alternative career that can make you equally happy and it can help you for your medical school application. So for me, when I went into the after degree education, I was able to work at different schools. I got even one of my reference letters actually for medical school was one of the teachers that I worked with at a school. I also coached sports teams at those schools, so I was able to build up my extracurriculars. and the education degree for me, it was pretty straightforward. So I managed to also improve my GPA as well. And that also helped improve my marks to make me more competitive to apply. So, don't think that getting in is a setback, like it won't ever happen. Many people in our class applied, more than once. But at the same time, it's also important to be practical and to think of an alternative career that can make you equally happy, as well as something that can also help you to get into medical school.
One thing that I'm just going to drop in the chat, just in case any of you happen to be from this background, is that U of A offers a really cool program, and I'm excited to be part of it for this summer, called MD-AIDE. So that's AIDE. And what we do is it's an initiative that tries to help people get into med school who typically have faced a lot of barriers to get into med school. So that could be like visible minorities and like low income families. So through this program, we provide free Mcat Prep. So I'm excited to be teaching the biochem section this summer. And we also provide free interview prep. So if you happen to be from one of these backgrounds, I'd encourage you to check out that page. And if you're not sure if you're from that background, check out that page to see if you would be eligible. I don't think we're doing our outreach quite yet for the summer, but it'll begin next semester sometime. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested.
And I'm actually, I don't know, Kim, if you knew, but I'm also an MDA too, but I'm in the interview executive.
Good stuff.
So, right now we're actually working on preparing like students who are trying to interview for medical school. So the people who started last year, and as Kim said, the outreach for like the next cycle would happen in the summer, and she would take on the students who for the MCAT, and then my group and I would help students who would prepare for the interview. And yeah, so there's that. And the student loans, well, I tried to minimize it because I lived at home throughout my entire degree. So I'm from Calgary, and so I went to University of Calgary, and I knew that I would be in school for a long time. So luckily I live at home, and I don't have to pay rent, and so I minimized it. But you're right, in terms of tuition, it added up over time for sure. So.
In case we didn't say this before, I'm not sure if we mentioned it, you do get paid in residency. So after you're done your 4 years in medical school, when your residency is happening, you do get paid. It's not great pay, but it pays your living expenses. And then once you're done residency, you get doctor money. So it all evens out in the end. Okay, are there any final questions? Because if not, this ended on a pretty good timing.
Oh, wow. 1 minute left. That's crazy.
Crazy.
I guess maybe, any final questions or anything?
If anybody has follow-up
Yeah.
questions after this, sorry, Jonah, to just before I forget, Kim and Mohammed, are you okay for me to be in touch with you to say, hey, some students had follow-up questions they didn't get to ask, or they thought about them afterwards? Would that be okay if I can be in touch with you with those?
Yep.
Awesome. Go ahead, Jonah. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I was planning on running my MCAT this summer, as well as taking a prep course. And I was wondering, at what point should I sit down and book that?
To book the MCAT or book the prep course?
Either one, both.
I would check pretty soon into the prep course, because those often start in May. So maybe in January-ish they might open. I personally did Prep 101 as my prep course. You do not need to do a prep course to succeed on the MCAT. It was a resource that I could afford, that I was lucky to afford, and that it worked for my summer schedule. So anyway, I would look at that soon. I don't actually know how early you need to register for the MCAT. That was a long time ago.
I think it's around March is when they open up if you want to take it in like June or July or August, which is probably when you're going to take it. So I would check the AAMC website, which tells you the dates. They do fill up really quickly. Like I remember when I took it, all of my friends and we literally stayed up till like, I think it was midnight or whenever when it was open to take the spots that we wanted. They get taken up within like literally a few hours. I don't know if was that the same when you were taking it, Kim? Like the spots get taken up quickly?
I remember a mad dash moment. That's very vague in my memory. But yeah, the most common kind of schedule tends to be that people often start studying when summer starts in like May-ish, and then they often write it at the end of the summer. So they kind of take the 4 months to study for it. I recommend taking it seriously. Like that was my full-time job that summer, studying for the MCAT. I did not want to retake it. It's expensive, it's time consuming. I was like, I'm writing this once and I'm writing it good. So that's what I did. It was my full-time job that summer, studying for the MCAT.
Yeah, that's the plan. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.